it's Jake, and I'm going to be talking about the Fountain of Youth. The Fountain of Youth is located at 11 Magnolia Avenue in St. Augustine. The general admission ticket prices to get into the Fountain of Youth range from $9.95 to $19.95. It is claimed that the property is where the Spanish explorer Pedro Menendez arrived in 1565 when claiming Florida for Spain. At the time of Pedro Menendez's arrival, the native Timucua Indians occupied the land. It is said that the real first Thanksgiving happened on September 8th, 1565, on the grounds where the Fountain of Youth is located, and the Spanish explorers served a meal of celebration. One of the selling points of this tourist attraction is that the grounds holds the Fountain of Youth, and if you drink from it, you will have youth restored. This location is very important in St. Augustine because it's almost a starting place for the history of the city. The Fountain of Youth is important to me because although it may be a tourist trap, inside the walls of the attraction you could find out a lot about St. Augustine's history.
Hey, this is Jack, and I wanted to talk to you about the Lightning Museum in downtown St. Augustine. I found this place interesting because of how often Flagler students pass by historic locations without batting an eye. We are truly blessed to live in a place where there is so much to explore and discover. I myself, for the longest time, had always passed by the building, assuming it was just another part of the college or a gift shop and picture area for tourists, like a good amount of the town is. After going in for the first time a couple of months ago, I was very much so wrong. Coming back here made me feel like it was only right that I did my presentation on the Leitner Museum. The Leitner Museum is a staple of the downtown area, located across the street from our very own Flagler College. The museum was founded in 1887 and houses mainly antiques from the American Gilded Age. The Gilded Age was an era extending roughly from 1877 to 1900, which was sandwiched between the Reconstruction era and the Progressive era. It was a time of rapid economic growth, especially in the northern and western United States. Before being repurposed, the building was formerly known as the Alcazar Hotel, built by Henry Flagler himself. The building itself can also be considered art in a way as well, because the 1887 Spanish Renaissance Revival style building is quite beautiful in its own right. The spot is so prestigious that it has been listed on the National Register of Historic Places since February of 1971. Moving on to the contents of the museum, there is a multitude of artifacts including pottery, sculptures, and other artworks from all over the world, from lamps by Louis Comfort Tiffany and exquisite shells and geological specimens from around the world to porcelain produced at Severe's and Victorian mechanical musical instruments. The Leitner Museum's collections are rich, eclectic, and always engaging. One of the most bizarre exhibits was the lion belonging to Winston Churchill that was preserved after it had died. The lion is quite extraordinary because of how well it has been preserved. It is also an interesting choice to keep a lion as a pet, but seems like a fitting gift for someone like Winston Churchill, who possessed several lion-like qualities like immense bravery and leadership. Several pieces of architecture from the hotel and other buildings were interesting as well. The sauna room and shower room seemed a little run down, but it was intriguing to see some of the first showers and saunas being made and how they were used. The sauna and showers using electricity is also quite impressive for the period of time they were constructed in. It's truly remarkable to compare what was considered a luxury and what is now considered a household item. There was also a lot of colorful vases and tools displayed in another section of the art gallery. Some items were designed to just look pretty, while other items like silverware, plates, and cups had more practical uses. The variety of colors made me wonder if each decision was a style choice or thought out for more practical reasons like color coordination. A lot of the work and items stored at the museum were mainly pieces owned or made for the affluent. In a moment, this made me question why there is a lack of representation of common objects used by a regular person in the museum. I concluded that due to the era of work housed here, that most of the art here was high-end. The Leitner Museum is a place that is appealing to the eye with various types of art, each filled with a rich history behind them. In conclusion, the Leitner Museum is a significant place in the history of not only St. Augustine, but the United States through an inspiring and interactive experience.
I chose to talk about the Castillo de San Marcos. The construction of the oldest masonry fort in the United States started in 1672 and was finished in 1695. The fort was used to protect its town and the people living there when they had been attacked. Luckily, Castillo is undefeated in all the battles that it conquered. Beating the English colonial forces, led by Carolina Colony Governor James Moore in 1702, and then by English Georgia Colonial Governor James Oglethorpe in 1740. The reason why it is undefeated is because this fort was built of coquina blocks, which is a soft limestone made of cemented seashells. With this material, the bullets will go directly into the wall, and the fort will absorb all of the energy, so no damage will be taken. With normal stone, it will shatter, but the walls are so soft, so it goes right into the wall and gets stuck. This is also true for cannonballs, so this fort was basically indestructible. Another reason for its success was the shape of the fort. Designed by Ignacio Daza, this fort was made to hit all enemies from all angles. From all the tips of the fort, you can see if enemies are sneaking up, which makes it difficult for the opponents. When exploring the fort, we got to see the bedrooms, bathrooms, and storage rooms. This was cool to see because it felt like we were in the shoes and experiencing it for ourselves. We also got to see their defense systems. On the top platform, they had cannons and mortars lined up on every single side. They did this to show how they defended themselves and how it is a lot different nowadays with the types of weapons and techniques used in battle. I chose the Castillo because the first night when I moved here to Flagler College, I went with my roommate at the time and some people we had met to take a walk downtown to the fort and just hung out by the water. And that little moment started a great line of memories that I will never forget. Also, every day going to class or just going downtown, walking over the Bridge of Lions, I always look at the Castillo, and it's just a beautiful sight to have in the heart of our city that shows our historic background.
Hey, this is Callie. One of the sites we visited was the Talamato Cemetery, located on Cordova Street. What makes this particular cemetery so interesting is that it's the oldest cemetery in Florida. It was originally a Franciscan Indian mission in the 18th century, but eventually became a cemetery during the British period. The Indians arrived at St. Augustine in the 16th century due to attacks from competing tribes. At the time of their move to the site of what is now currently known as the Talamato Cemetery, the British destroyed Florida missions in the early 1700s. As the British conquered St. Augustine due to the treaty that ended the French and Indian War, the majority of Spanish citizens left. After the settlement of the American Revolution, Spain returned to Florida. The Minorcans had arrived during this time with their priest. The priest asked the British governor for his deceased members to be buried in Talamato, which then transformed the mission into the use of a cemetery. Those buried in this cemetery include people from Spain, Cuba, Ireland, Minorca, Italy, Greece, Africa, Haiti, France, and the American South and Northeast. There are also graves of soldiers from both sides of the Civil War. The first bishop of St. Augustine, Augustin Varro, is laid to rest in this location, along with Father Felix Varela, a Cuban priest, as well. It is said that over 1,000 people are buried here, but only 100 headstones are present. All burials ended in 1884 because the government thought that yellow fever was spreading with the help of the cemeteries. However, it wasn't until 1905 it was found that it was spread through mosquitoes. It's interesting to walk around the cemetery and see the different headstones and what they represent. It could be a difference in money, or it could pertain to a difference in rank or power of the people. Even children's headstones usually contain a flower. When seeing a headstone for a child, more times than not, the cause of death was infection. The Talamato Cemetery is extremely important to St. Augustine because it tells a story and tells a history. Cemeteries are essentially public records. The headstones on the graves give some insight into who lived around this location and when. Not to mention, the cemetery keeps the idea of the deceased alive. The people don't just disappear, and their legacy can live on. They won't be forgotten. The cemetery reminds us of the connections throughout the world in this place we now call home. I think everyone who lives in St. Augustine should go visit the Talamato Cemetery to gain a perspective and understanding of the history of the place we live now.
Hey, this is Skylar. Our last site visit was the most important one for me. It was the Lincolnville Museum and Cultural Center, formerly known as Excelsior Museum and Cultural Center, which is an African American history museum located at 102 Martin Luther King Avenue. It is located in the former Excelsior High School, St. Augustine's first black public high school. The building is held in the neighborhood known as Lincolnville, which was originally a distinct town but is now a piece of the city of St. Augustine. The town was originally settled by freed black slaves after the American Civil War. The museum was primarily founded by Otis Mason, an Excelsior High School alum, who in 1984 became the first black superintendent of the St. Johns County School District. The main focus of the museum is on the history, culture, and contributions of African Americans in the St. Augustine area. When thinking about St. Augustine, black history is not usually in the picture, and especially not Lincolnville. It is one of the chief battlegrounds in America's civil rights struggle. Lincolnville is seen as a non-existent to a majority of spectators, especially because even our own trolley tours of the town do not venture into that part. We mostly just focus on the history of the Spanish and the overall creation of the town. In my opinion, the African American history of the town is very important and does not gain enough recognition in the way the town was founded. It shows that the whites and Spaniards had way more power than the blacks. Their identities were hidden amongst the others and forgotten. In the plaza, there is even a monument in the ground for African American history, but it is overstepped by many. In the museum, a man named Frank B. Butler is displayed. He was an African American businessman who originally established a beach resort for the African Americans during the segregation era. He had worked in Lincolnville, where he established his own market as well as a real estate business. He had acquired land on Anastasia Island. That land is the location of the beach resort for African Americans. It became known as Butler Beach. At the time, Florida's beaches were for white-only use, but with Butler's new purchase, he was able to provide the black community with a place of their own. If Butler had not come to St. Augustine, he would have not made such a big impact for his community, but without the history of Lincolnville, we would not know this truth. In the depths of Lincolnville resides the Freedom Trail, which is a moving experience. On this trail, you're able to follow the stories of individuals who lived here and their experiences. In our own town, multiple protests had taken place, and Dr. Martin Luther King had lived here for some time. This is the history that should not be forgotten or left out of the narrative of our beloved St. Augustine town. The Lincolnville Museum is my most favorite site to visit because I am able to hear stories and read information about individuals whose voices are not usually portrayed. It is a powerful site to me, and I believe it deserves more recognition. It is very sad that the black history of this town is not a bigger portion, and it is barely shown.
That's all, folks.